Dr. Holt, I think we got a quorum here. I'll leave it to Chair Simpson to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we probably have enough people to get started. If Mr. Chair is comfortable with that.
Yeah, I'm more than comfortable with that. 306. Perfect. I think we're good to go.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Director Finn. So, welcome everybody to today's Executive Steering Committee. Again, Dr. Holt, and I do the majority of our process and lead us through it. So thanks so much for being in the space today. I mentioned we got much to do, and so we want to make sure to be effective around it. At the same time, being thoughtful to lend voice to everyone's participation. So we're going to do something a little different for this particular meeting than we've done in other meetings in terms of identifying ourselves. Since we have it recorded, I think it's really simple for us to capture our faces and our presence. For everyone who's an Executive Steering Committee member, of course, my ask is that your video stays on so we can capture you and see you. And in order to, in fact, our first exercise around how we're going to identify our presence is reflective of that. And so, by way of checking in, instead of having each person speak, I'm just going to have you wave. Everybody who's present, who's part of the Executive Steering Committee, if you would just kind of wave at the camera. Hi, it's me. Hello, I am here. Wonderful. We can capture that. So welcome into the meeting. Susan, you're going to give us some background information, and then we will proceed.
Yes, happy to do that, Dr. Holt, and good afternoon, everyone. So just a quick Zoom review and then a little bit of the for today kinds of reminders that we have both for you as ESC members and also for the public attendees who are joining us today. First reminder is that we are live streaming and recording this meeting, and so this whole conversation is going to be part of the public record, and just want you to be aware of that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Zoom because I think you're all pros right now. Main thing is please do remember to raise your hand to speak. It helps Dr. Holt just get an idea about who is in the queue. And the way that you do that, of course, is down here in the participant panel right at the bottom. If you click on that, it opens this panel, and the raise hand should be to the bottom right of your panel. If you're using a tablet, that might look a little bit different. And if you don't see a raise hand, but you see three little ellipses, little dots, then click on that, and that should be your way to get to the raise hand feature. As Dr. Holt mentioned, ESC members, if you can please leave your videos on. I certainly understand that, especially after a long day, might be a little exhausting if you've been on many video calls, but to the extent you're able to and comfortable leaving your video on, that would be great. Those of us who are not with the ESC, not actively speaking, would be turning ours off. So again, live streaming and videoing today, and everything is part of the public record. If you are an attendee, so a member of the public joining us, either by live streaming or through the webinar, we're glad that you're here. There is a raise hand feature for those of you who are joining as attendees on the Zoom webinar. If you wish to make a public comment, an oral public comment at the time that, that we provide for that in the agenda, if you can please raise your hand using that raise hand feature in the webinar panel, then we'll be able to know that, and we can unmute you and ask you to make a comment when that time is appropriate. If you'd like to send in your comments, we have an email address on the screen, as well as a phone number you can call and leave a voicemail message. That information is also on your agenda. And if you have any technical issues, advise anyone who is in the Zoom room today to please write down Natalie's phone number there, the 503 number, 367-0020. And if you do have any problem, you can text or call Natalie, and she will assist you. And Dr. Holt, I believe those are all my announcements.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you go to that next slide, that kind of goes over our agenda. We've done our welcome. We're going to go to our public comment in just a moment. Let me remind everyone briefly of a few of our principles of agreement. And that is your voice matters, and therefore what you have to say is important. And I want to make sure that we're hearing from all the voices. So if there's some discussion and dialogue and others haven't weighed in and you are ready to weigh in again, I may pause you and give someone else an opportunity to be heard or ask to hear from them. Their voice matters, which therefore also means that we create space to hear everyone. Space to hear and to listen for understanding is our next agreement, is that we listen to understand. And since we're trying to understand, that means we deal with issues and not people. We attack and address and assess the issue we're talking about, and it never becomes personal about an attack toward the person. Therefore, next principle is that it might become uncomfortable in our conversation. That's a part of working through things. We rarely change when we're comfortable. So as we're working through it, we understand that it may become uncomfortable. And then the next principle follows after that, and that is to expect and accept non-closure. We're not solving everything today. We can't solve it all today, but we can work and talk through, especially with all the things that are in front of us. And so with that quick reminder, let's go to any public comment. You see the agenda. I won't read through it. Susan.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Holt. So I am looking for any raised hands to see if we have anyone who wishes to make public comment. I do have one hand raised. So before we begin, let me just note again, please raise your hand. We do hope that folks that are making public comment will focus their comments on today's meeting topics. Each speaker will have up to 1 minute, and I have a handy little timer that I'll put on the screen just to help us all keep track of that 1 minute time. I'll give you a verbal 10 seconds when you have 10 seconds remaining. And again, if you do wish to make more extensive comments, please take a look at your agenda. And there are a couple of ways to do that. So I am going to, again, see one hand up so far. I'm going to share the clock on my screen here. And then I'm going to ask John if John, who has his hand raised, would like to speak. So John, I have asked you to unmute. If you would please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I'm John Lee, Clark County. I would just like to remind the members attended, thank you for the opportunity. 2 years ago, PEMCO did a survey of the citizens in the Northwest, Oregon and Washington, and 94% of the people overwhelmingly asked that their transportation dollars be spent to reduce traffic congestion. And a lion's share of this money appears to be spent not to reduce traffic congestion. There are so many problems, but at the end of the day, people do not want to spend time stuck in traffic congestion. And I would ask you to focus on traffic congestion reduction as your overwhelming goal. Thank you very much.
All right, John, thank you for your comment. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a comment? Dr. Holt, I do not see any other hands raised.
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate it. Handled that so smoothly. We appreciate that. Thank you. We are going to go directly into the update from our director. So Megan, to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Holt, and thank you, Executive Steering Committee. You can go to the next slide, Susan. So as we move forward in our work, I always think that it's important that we are acknowledging the history of our project area and the harms to communities of color, specifically the Black community in Albina, both past and present, that resulted from construction of I-5. And I think in acknowledging this history, it helps us move forward with the great work that we have ahead of us. So as we begin to design and future build this project with you as the Executive Steering Committee and with the community, we must work together to make sure that our efforts moving forward don't exacerbate or repeat the harms of the past. And knowing that restorative justice is one of our foundational values up for consideration today, we remain committed to doing our work differently, making sure that we are centering the voices of the community that was historically harmed, the Black community, and making sure that we're providing economic opportunities for all communities of color, not only both in the design and construction of the project, but in how the project can support and catalyze long-term economic development opportunities in Albina. So next slide, please. So as we move forward with that understanding, I just want to note for the Executive Steering Committee that we are reaching a couple key milestones, including the completion of our NEPA, or National Environmental Policy Act, decision document in coordination with the Federal Highway Administration. And then later this fall, we'll also be reaching a 20% design milestone, which really builds upon the 15% design that it has been done to date, really to be responsive to our partner, stakeholder, and community feedback that we've received over the past year. And I know I mentioned this last meeting, but want to make sure that there's a fine point on this, that we did make an adjustment to the 30% design milestone. Previously it was spring of 21, it is now fall of 21. And this is the point in which we'll be moving from what I like to call, design assumptions, transitioning into establishing the design concepts. And so we've shifted this deliverable by a few months to ensure that our good work from the independent highway cover assessment, from which you'll be hearing more from this afternoon, is done before that 30% design mark, before we start establishing the design concepts. And also to make sure that we're providing the time needed for our newly formed Historic Albina Advisory Board to shape our design and our process as we move forward towards that milestone. And then our design work will continue to carry through 21, 22, and into 23 with expected design completion and construction starting in 2023. And as we bring on our CMGC, or our Construction Management General Contractor, we'll be able to hone in on the details of the schedule and looking towards early work packages and our main construction package as well. So next slide. Speaking of CMGC, again, a reminder that Hamilton Cent Joint Venture, in association with Raymore, will be joining us as our CMGC team, really rounding out our team and allowing us to move forward into action. We expect that we'll be contracting with that team next month and onboarding this important partner to begin their work. And so again, the advantages of Hamilton Cent Joint Venture joining us early in the project development process will help us not only bring early innovation to the project design, again, as we work towards that 30% design milestone in the near term, but really helping us, again, hone in on our project delivery schedule, our design opportunities to address community input, and manage risk along the way. And then furthermore, it also helps us take action with our DBE, or Disadvantaged Business Enterprise and Workforce program, with our 18 to 22% DBE goal range for the project. There's a significant opportunity from an economic perspective for our small business and DBE community partners, and we look forward to beginning that work. My last slide today is on the project governance structure, speaking of the work and who will be with us all along the way. I know at our last meeting, there were a number of questions around the different committees and the communication and interaction, I think, between the different committees, specifically with the Executive Steering Committee, the Historic Albina Advisory Board, and our Community Oversight Advisory Committee. So I wanted to bring this forward again today. I think we covered this in our first meeting together, but important to bring it back to make sure I'm responsive to your questions. You'll note that we have the direct communication lines between the Historic Albina Advisory Board and the Community Oversight Advisory Committee. We'll be working to ensure that we have that collaboration and direct interaction to make sure that as the steering committee is making recommendations on the project to our Transportation Commission, that it's done in coordination with our community committees that we have at hand, and also being supported by our technical and project teams, which you see there with the project management group, technical leadership team, and different sub-teams supporting the work. I'll also note that we, since you've last seen this, did make a change to make sure that we were accurately reflecting the independent highway cover assessment team's connection to the executive steering committee. And I know that that'll continue to be covered by that respective independent team, but you'll see that direct line of communication and reporting structure with the dash line to the Historic Albina Advisory Board to ensure that the community voices are also heard. So in the spirit of communication, I've asked Janelle Bell, who's our facilitator of the COAC, or the Community Oversight Advisory Committee, to join us today for a quick overview of what's been going on with COAC to start that direct line of communication. So Janelle, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Megan, and good afternoon, ESC members. I hope everyone is staying safe and well during these times. As Megan indicated, the Community Oversight Advisory Committee, we've been busily working. At our last meeting, we had a really great discussion in small groups, really around three various themes. The first thing was ideas that the committee had in terms of how to really ensure that the changing culture to address people of color's experience on the work site, really wanting to make sure that as a project is constructed, that the work site really embodied the sort of ethos of DEI and ideas that they had with respect to that. The second area was a need for the project to really disaggregate DBE and workforce goals. It's really important that the analysis is desegregated such that we really know who's working on the project, both in terms of the contractor community as well as the workforce community. And then finally was ideas that COAC had with respect to things that ODOT and the COAC could do in terms of tools for holding the CMGC accountable to the community goals. So that was a really great discussion, as is always the case with COAC. One additional note is we've added a couple of new members to COAC to really step into this oversight capacity. So we've had representatives both from the building trades as well as Northwest College of Construction. So we anticipate meeting in December for our first time to meet with the contractor.
Thank you, Janelle. And with that, that concludes my my director's update.
Questions, Executive Steering Committee? Thank you, Megan. Thanks, Janelle. Glad you're here.
I had a quick question, Janelle. Do you have specific names of individuals that are going to be added to the COAC, or were you just saying that they're going to be individuals that you're looking at from those particular organizations?
Yes, we have two additional names that Director Simpson, we can circulate to you. In fact, it's probably a good opportunity for us to circulate the new roster so that you all can kind of have the full list.
Great, thank you,
So
sir.
we'll do that.
Appreciate it.
Excellent. Any questions from the Executive Steering Committee? Nate?
Yeah, thank you, Janelle, for that report out. I don't know if it's happened yet, but I want to say it's probably been about a year now that some in this group heard me speak very clearly that we're losing a lot of time and momentum on waiting and planning without actually getting BOLI involved, who controls all the workforce data. And when I look across the board as we speak, we have no Black and brown real representation right now in the trades. We have a project that's starting in no longer than 2 years from now. And we haven't even, and I've heard people like James Posey mention this in prior COAC meetings, that we need to create a runway now, which means that we need to get people of color into these trades, because I don't know where they're coming from if we're not populating those trade unions and those non-unions. So I just would hope that if you haven't started talking to BOLI, I flagged this with Stephen Holt as well. We need to do that like tomorrow, if possible, and really just see if BOLI is going to commit to being a part of this, which they work with ODOT all the time on report after report every year about the culture that you spoke to early on in your opening statement. So I guess my question is, can we get that moving like very quickly with ODOT staff hearing that as well on this call?
Thank you, Nate.
I actually really like that. Megan and Leah, maybe, I don't know if that would be a good point for you guys to maybe touch base with one another. Leah obviously is a conduit to the governor's office, but also I would assume that you have a pretty open line to the BOLI office as well, to kind of figure out how do we connect those dots.
Yeah, absolutely, Leah. I'm happy to coordinate with you on that if you concur.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other comment or question for the director's report or for John L?
I see Marlon with his hand up.
Yeah, I would just like to ask in the future if folks could help out with the acronyms. There's just continuous acronyms thrown out through these presentations, and the average Joe, including myself, if you're not doing this every single day, it's hard to follow at times. So please just be mindful of that moving forward. The heavy use on the acronyms, one or two, cool, but when you're constantly throwing them out there, folks are getting lost. It's like another foreign language. Thank you.
Appreciate you highlighting that. Thanks, Marlon.
So just to confirm or to answer that question, just in case, I think the two that we used within that previous conversation, Megan used COAC, which is the Community Oversight Advisory Committee, which is
Correct.
one of the groups based on that org chart that she was just displaying. And then BOLI, obviously Bureau of Labor and Industries, which essentially kind of oversees the regulatory framework of the state's, workforce requirements to a certain extent and a lot of other things. I can't give you the full definition, but that's kind of it's a state agency.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And since you were speaking, Chair Simpson, did you want to speak into today's meeting at all and share perspective?
Yeah, I'll do a quick fly-in. I know today, obviously, the big meat of today really is around values and charter adoption, and then getting into the CAP assessment work. But I would just personally, I think for the premise of everything that we're working on, and there's a lot of ambiguity right now, clearly probably over for the next week and a half as we get through elections. And I just want to urge everybody that I would assume we're going to have a completely different landscape going into next year, and more importantly, after the next couple of weeks after the 3rd. So I just, for this work specifically, I'm personally just wanting folks to keep in mind that, we want to stay the course. We want to keep things moving forward. I think we have all the right stakeholders at the table. I think we've done a lot of due diligence to this point. To say that anything's final or complete, I would say no. But I definitely think as we're looking to adopt, charter language and values, so we can actually start operating as like a functional board to a certain extent, and voting on steps and things like that, and things that we like or dislike. It would be helpful for us to get through today, trying to close that piece out so we can move on to the next steps. Obviously, the CAP is just one piece to the overall project, and we have to keep we have to kind of stay aware and stay cognizant that there is a full project here, and to not get sidetracked by one element of the project. Obviously, it's a very important piece as it pertains to the opportunities that could come as a result of this CAP. But I definitely would strongly urge everybody that, this is a bigger piece to the pie that we're going to be working on. We have several years, obviously, as you saw from Megan's presentation, to work through some of these things. So I'm hoping to get everybody on the same page. That's the key, because obviously it's better to report something positive to the rest of the commission and the legislature, for that matter, because obviously the communication line goes all the way up to that level. But I would just hope that we get everybody on the same page and get to a consensus on this charter and values, so we can move on to the next steps. So that's mainly it for me. Dr.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. That tees up our next portion of conversation, which is the values and the charter. And today what we are going to do, and this is for the sake of those who are watching and or listening in as the audience, Today, what we're going to do is really adopt values and adopt charter. We've spent quite a bit of time speaking individually offline, working through concerns and making adjustments around the charter language and around values and what they identify. Both the charter and the value are documents that are supportive of one another and really collaborative in their essence. And so without going through specifics of the charter again, or the values again, it is my understanding that we are ready to move forward around adopting them. And so we will start with the charter first, and I will put it to the group in this as a question, and I will give an opportunity for any concern or anything to discuss that was not covered already. Our first position will be to adopt our charter. So you see it in front of you without, again, the specifics blown out or teased out around each of the 6 points. If there are any questions or concerns, please indicate them now. All right, none. So everyone who is ready to move forward around adopting the charter, I think we can follow the same position of a thumbs up. Ready to go forward. Excellent. We have consent. Thank you very much. Charter adopted. We're going to do the same around the values. Again, I'm not going to go through each of the values. We've talked about them individually, and I've met with each of us. So if there are areas of concern or question, here is your opportunity to identify that.
Yeah, I have a concern. A year ago, the Portland School District identified the impact of I-5 and then this project on Harriet Tubman Middle School. And we've been engaged in that dialogue with this group, both informally and now formally, for almost a year. And at last meeting, I suggested some language because when I noted in one of the non-meeting conversations I had that there really wasn't anything that addressed the concerns of the school districts relating to the air quality for students at Harriet Tubman, I suggested some language at the last meeting. And I guess my question is that language been included in this? There was an alternative suggested, which I think does not meet, and I've double checked with the school district, does not meet the what we think should be the standard. And just as a refresher for everybody, the language that I had suggested at the last meeting was air quality on the grounds of Harriet Tubman Middle School and the adjacent Littlest Albina Park is at a level that medical and health professionals find is safe for children and youth. So my question is, like, we have a statement, a values statement. I had suggested this language, and I want to know, like, whether it's in here or whether the substitute language was put in, because that will impact whether or not I'm supportive of the values statement.
I appreciate that. And you're talking specifically as it relates to that portion of the value statement, not any other portion specifically in regard to air quality for students. Is that correct?
Right. I'm wondering
okay.
Language,
okay.
Since we have just an outline.
Okay, thank you.
Perhaps Dr. Holt, it would be helpful if I just mentioned what that the other language was, because I suggested it. So what it was in the outcomes on the values of climate and air quality was that the project would improve the air quality for the students at Harriet Tubman and for those who recreate at Littlest Albina Park. That being an outcome that the agency at least was able to at least have a high level of confidence that that was something that we could accomplish. And Julie and I didn't get a chance to talk about it, but we unfortunately didn't really get to connect on that before the meeting. But that was the language that I suggested on behalf of the project and the agency that was achievable for us was to improve, not do no harm, do better, improve the air quality as an outcome for the students at Harriet Tubman and for those at Lewis Olana Park. So that was the language I suggested based on what I heard in our last meeting.
And
Dr. Holt, I'm sorry, this is Metro Council President Lynn Peterson. Is there a way for me to go ahead and move the language that Brendan just acknowledged and put it on the table for a vote?
I actually, but I'd like to have a discussion about it, and I'd like to share.
Of course, usually there's a motion and a second, then a discussion.
Well, I guess I haven't yet had my question answered of whether, when I suggested the language last week, whether that was put in, because if it was put in, then I guess you need to amend the document, not offer Brendan's language.
Well, just to chime in real quick, I don't know how many attorneys we have on the call here, so I just want to make sure that the language is not, what Brendan is proposing is not hindering like your role and responsibility as a board member for PPS and your guys' values and the things that you're wanting to ensure that are covered as it pertains to this project, which is in close proximity to the school. So I'm just trying to make sure I don't personally understand what the big distinction is in the language. And so I just want to make sure that, because
that's a great question. And that's and this was sort of my response to Brendan, because I did appreciate Brendan coming back with some alternative language. The reason why we felt there was a difference between the two, and I'm not an attorney either, so we're all lay people here, for most of us anyway, was the difference is that we've always viewed this as not just this particular project, but the overall presence of the freeway. And if you go back to the sort of the start of the values statement that talks about, we gather to take action towards righting the wrongs of the past. So sort of our view from PPS was, this is not just this incremental project that's going to have an impact, but the fact that the freeway has really impacted the air quality for students who attend Harriet Tubman Middle School. And so much so that when we reopened it 3 years ago, we invested over $20 million in a very state-of-the-art filtering system. So the inside the school is safe, but it's outside, it's still not. And the concern is that the language that Brendan suggested is you could have technically an improvement, but that it be immaterial and the air is still not safe for and healthy for children and youth to be outside in. And that would not just be for the school district grounds, but also for anybody who's recreating in the adjacent Portland parks. And so it wasn't that it doesn't matter. We're looking at this project and the larger impact the freeway has on this school community that's right adjacent to the freeway, and the freeway is going to be getting closer to.
Thank you.
My intention, Mr. Chair, was to create a metric. That's why I made that suggestion, so we could have kind of a guiding post for us, as opposed to the other language, because I just thought it would be if we were putting it in an outcome, we could have something that was more metric based.
I see where you're going.
So
would you ask?
One moment, so we don't speak over one another. Jan, go ahead.
Would you ask Lynn Peterson to repeat her motion, please? So I understand what it is what she suggested.
Thanks. My motion was to move the language that Brendan put on the table, and I would need him to repeat it.
I believe it's in the document, Dr. Holt.
In the document.
Oh, apologies.
It's in the document.
It should already be in the document.
It is. The language that Brendan proposed, what he quoted, was in the document. And Lynn's motion would be to adopt the document as stands. And Julia's concern is that it doesn't identify specifically enough the concerns of Portland Public Schools.
Well,
Does that answer?
yes, it does, but I'd like to make a statement if I may. I think that there's a number of things in this document that don't perhaps address to the level of detail many of the priorities that we as individuals have that sit on the steering committee. Certainly from the capacity and congestion perspective, this document doesn't fully address my concerns either in another section of the document, but I am willing to take what's stated here in general principles and move this forward so we can continue this discussion. And with that in mind, I'd like to second Lynn Peterson's motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
But apparently,
Any further discussion?
just a question. So apparently my language was never added, so we don't even need to add Lynn's because my language was never added or even considered. Instead, Brendan's language was inserted in the document. Is that correct?
There was discussion around your language, Julia, that was part of our, I think you and I even talked about that. And then the response from ODOT is as what you've seen, and that was circulated for everyone to process. So yes, is the simple answer is that yes, your comments were captured. No comments of the executive steering committee are ignored or not captured.
But there's no reason to add Brendan's language because you already added it. So for the record, PPS, that would be not a satisfactory approach because the metric is not, well, there's no metric established, so improved does not meet the same standard as that it's healthy for children and youth to be outside at Harriet Tubman Middle School.
Yeah. So if we're going to move forward then with, thank you for the discussion. Did I miss anyone? Is there any other comment?
Well, should I then remove the motion off the table and we vote on the entire document?
I think either way, we're going to be fine.
Okay, then I'll just leave my motion on there and we'll just.
It's been moved and seconded. So everyone who's in favor of moving forward the values as they stand, if you would indicate so, you can merely give a thumbs up as an indication that I'm good.
I think Dr. Holt, it might be best you can call them out as a roll.
You want to call? You want to have a roll call? I can do that. We'll start with Kelsey.
Aye.
Thank you. Orlando Simpson.
Aye.
Janet Jarvis.
Aye.
Marlon Holmes.
Aye.
Nate McCoy.
Aye.
Bryson Davis.
Aye.
Brendan Finn.
Aye.
Leah Horn.
Aye.
Ebony Amato, Dr. Amato.
Aye.
President Lynn Peterson.
Aye, thanks.
Julia Brim Edwards.
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, the motion has been carried. The values will be adopted as we are.
So Dr. Holt, I have a question for Brendan. So if this is a metric, what are you suggesting the level of improvement be? What's your baseline and the level of improvement that was just adopted by the steering committee?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the baseline of having it improved. I can get you the document because we had the independent peer review done. I can get you that metric, that exact metric.
I guess so, but what are you suggesting what are you suggesting it's going to be improved by?
The baseline? Yeah, how much it'll improve by the baseline? Again, I can get that document because we had an independent peer review of scientists and PhDs that took a look at it and provided that. So I can definitely get that to you. And
was that improvement level based on consulting with health professionals?
Well, I'll bring in Megan here, but Megan, can you jump on because you're a little bit more in depth about the independent peer review and how it related to air quality.
Yeah, so the air quality analysis that was done previously for the project did follow both federal and state standards for evaluating emissions, and with that showing that by building as compared to not building the project does have a slight improvement in pollutant emissions. We also went through, as Brendan mentioned, based on the direction from the OTC and environmental peer review, to look specifically at that methodology, as well as the findings and the outcome of that peer review from 6 national technical experts was that the methodology and the findings were appropriate for the transportation project. That said, I think, you know, one of the next steps for our work with the values and the desired outcomes being framed here is the performance measures and the performance metrics. And so I think that this can also be a conversation as we get to the specific metrics, now that we understand what the values and the outcomes can be as the guide.
So what was just approved, though, is a standard that may still be unhealthy because it's not yet set. It may be unhealthy for students who are outside at Harriet Tubman or in the adjacent park.
Well, I hate to end our conversation, and I certainly don't want to stop the concern. If we can parking lot it, just in light of the other items that we still need to cover, I would ask you to hold on to those concerns and make sure that we circle back to finish the conversation around what can be done. So thank you very much, everyone, for your work to this point and your thoughts to this point. I appreciate it. At this moment, we need to move forward in our focus, and that is to take on our independent highway cover assessment. And Sam, you are up. I'll let you introduce yourself and your team, and we'll follow suit.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holt. My name is Sam Imperati. I am the facilitator of the Independent Cover Assessment Team, also known as ICA for Independent Cover Assessment Team. Next slide is my welcome to you by way of a formal introduction. And what we're going to do in the remaining time is have a cover discussion from the September ESC meeting. Because of the constraints of time, last time we had to buzz through a bunch of materials, and we want to go back and make sure that we've given everyone on the ESC an opportunity to so we can answer your questions and respond to your feedback. So that's the major theme for this afternoon's presentation. You will see this, what will become a disclaimer that I won't be covering every time, but just to reinforce the fact that as it relates to the cover process, the ESC's role is to direct us. The Executive Steering Committee is to direct our independent consultant team in assessing the cover design and recommending scenarios to be presented to the OTC. So that's your role. Our role is to work for you. The consultant team is solely responsible for the analyses that will be developed surrounding the scenarios that will be put forth with regard to the covers. That will be an iterative process, but we will not personally be making any recommendations. That's in the sole province of the ESC. The next slide really is our agenda today. Nolan Leinhardt from ZGF Architects is going to give us an overview of the major points we covered, and then there'll be a pause for your questions, comments, and suggestions for improvement. I will then facilitate a discussion with you surrounding the major points that we heard last time and roll them up and see if we can get closure on them. I'll then discuss the role of the Highway Cover Coordinating Committee, which is HC3. We'll then end with some examples of highway covers around the country to give you sort of our first visualization of what these could look like. They are not what we are recommending. It'll simply be a primer, and then we will close with next steps in the process. So I'm going to turn it over now to Nolan, who will give us the review from last month.
Thanks, Sam, and good to see everybody. I'm going to be fairly short with this, really touching on the highlights since most of you saw this last month, but we did feel it would be helpful to review quickly since we were a little short on time last month. So just as a reminder for everyone, our team has been asked to answer 3 questions, and they're here on this slide, but I'll quickly summarize them. First being, how can this project serve community aspirations with the highway covers and areas immediately adjacent to them within the area of potential impact? The second is the yin to that yang, which is what could we modify that might go beyond the area of potential impact and serve community aspirations. And then the third is really, are there other architectural and engineering considerations to feasibly promote economic development and growth potential consistent with the community's vision? We've talked a little bit about the structure of our team and the way that it relates to your executive steering committee and other bodies that with whom we will work to understand the possibilities of these highway covers and to adjust our assumptions and strategies along the way. Those are here. And as Sam said, we just always want to reiterate that our direction of our studies, what we study and how we change any scenarios that we develop is primarily directed by the Executive Steering Committee. There will again be 3 scenarios which track pretty closely with those questions mentioned earlier. In addition to taking into account the base case as described in the NEPA environmental assessment, we will also study a scenario that studies possibilities within the area of potential impact, scenario 2 being outside the area of potential impact, and then a third scenario, which would be after you've seen those 2, the ESC has the opportunity to direct us to create a third scenario that would have the characteristics that you might feel need to be studied in addition to those first 2. We showed this diagram at the last meeting, and one of the pieces of feedback we received was that it would be helpful to understand timelines. So we've added in white the seasons. So understanding that things have moved around a little bit and hopefully will stay on track, but these are the general timeframes in which we expect to move to work session 1, where we really listen, understand an assessment of the project as it stands today and its potential. And then in work session 2, create 2 scenarios that we would then test out with you, see how well they serve the values and outcomes identified by the ESC, and get feedback about how we might modify them. And that work session 2 is also where the Executive Steering Committee would give us feedback about what a third scenario might include. And then in work session 3, we would present the first 2 scenarios refined, as well as the, at that time, new third scenario, which you would then give us feedback about, as well as potentially decide that one of those is worthy of recommendation to the Oregon Transportation Commission about how the project might complete these highway covers. So again, just a high-level overview of the highlights from last month. And if there were comments that you had that you didn't have a chance to make, we have time for that, and Sam will facilitate that.
So I'll open it up to questions, comments, or suggestions to make sure that we have a collective understanding of our approach, what's going to be reviewed, and the timeline within which to do it. And just please raise your hands, and I'll do my best to call on you as I see your hand raised on the screen. Looks like we're all good to go on that. And obviously, as usual, feel free to send us an email, give us a call, send up a flare, whatever works best. We'll be happy to be responsive to your needs. So let's move on to what we heard last time. And this is where we're hoping to have a major discussion and ensure that we are responsive to your needs. The comments were as follows, and I'll take them one at a time. There were two that dealt with independence and protection, and one dealt with meaningful public engagement and the requirement for trust. So I'll take the first ones that are on your screen now. We basically heard, how can the ESC ensure independent cover assessment is protected in order to be able to carry on our assessment, no backlash against us? So we took that charge seriously, and we are in the process of interviewing each and every one of you, and we received some comments and suggestions that we will incorporate in, but it's basically about playing cards up. Excuse me for a second. Sorry. The other piece that, so there's pristine clarity, is that we were selected by as a result of a panel interview. On that panel interview were representatives of Metro, the City of Portland, Albina Vision Trust, and ODOT. And that was a panel, in essence, sponsored by the OTC, or the Oregon Transportation Commission, to have ODOT solicit a contract, and they are our contract administrator. ODOT is our contract administrator. However, we consider the ESC as our functional client. You are the ones we are responsive to. Our analyses and recommendations for feedback and information loop and decision-making processes are in support of what you direct us to do and go forward. I think it's important to, again, emphasize that while we will be crafting or developing some scenarios, it'll be an iterative process. And as Nolan indicated on the last slide, that third scenario is an opportunity, if you so desire, to add, subtract, or modify the scenarios that have been coming forward in 1 and 2. But we, the independent cover assessment team, will not be making a recommendation to you on which scenario. That is solely within your prerogative. We are there to provide objective assessment. And then I'll point out one more thing about independence, and I'll open it up to questions. We heard there was a question about what relationships do ICA consultant team firms have with the project stakeholders. And in our contract, the independence language speaks directly to our separation from ODOT's Rose Quarter Improvement Team, the overall Rose Quarter team in its decision-making hierarchy. Portland's a small town, as you know. Members of our team have worked with just about everyone and every entity in and around the region at some point or another. And that's always going to be the case, and we enjoy that sense of our reputational interest of being fair and objective. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions, comments, or suggestions for improvement. Hearing none, we appreciate feedback. Oh, Lynn, are you waving your hand? I'm sorry, your background was making it seem like the sea behind you was wavy. Sorry.
I hope I didn't make you nauseous.
Good to go.
No, I raised my hand virtually as well. I just wanted to say I raised a lot of this, and so I want to just come back and say that just to repeat what I was worried about is that since yes, there was staff, but there wasn't a ESC liaison relationship to the scope creation and to the selection of the consultant, which now moving forward, fine, let's move forward. And I appreciate all the work that's been done in the conversation that this started, and maybe the clarification that it has created However, I still do believe that there needs to be some sort of liaison relationship from the ESC to the independent analysis, because it's not independent if it's just completely on its own without any kind of conversation. But it also, there just needs to be some sort of hotline. I'm just going to be very upfront. I appreciate an auditor's hotline, right, at Metro, so that things can be brought up that might not otherwise get elevated. And so to me, that's what that liaison, one or two people from this committee to work directly with your project team and get, some sort of update at some sort of regular interval. And if there are any issues, to raise them and work them through with ODOT, who actually controls the contract. So we recognize that there are budgetary limits and that there is a scope that was already created, which is now contract. But there are things that need to be discussed along the way that may not otherwise rise up. So I appreciate all the work, but I still believe that there should be some sort of liaison position.
Thank you, President Peterson. And the discussion after we get through meaningful public engagement is in fact exactly a proposition where we will ask you to what extent, if any, would you like to add membership to the Highway Cover Coordinating Committee from the various groups to accomplish that. Are there any other questions or comments or suggestions on the independence and protections topic? Recognizing that we will have a call to action here momentarily on that and related issues. Hearing nothing further, thank you. Let's move on to meaningful public engagement. One of the things we learned is some community members, as we knew, may not feel comfortable participating in yet another governmental agency planning effort. And so what are our plans to ensure authentic public participation? Our process, again, has been designed to engage the community and solicit their contributions through community workshops. So for every time we meet with you during our 3 scheduled work sessions, we will be having a companion community workshop. There will also be the same online surveys that we would be giving to the HAB, the Historic Albina Advisory Board, and the ESC. We would be giving to members of the public. And our contract has the opportunity to engage in focused stakeholder reach outs one-on-one basis. And we'll be asking you for suggestions as to who in particular would be a voice that we need to hear. We are developing in our one-on-ones, we are getting hands-on recommendations for particular groups and individuals to meet and reach out to. And excuse me, our public involvement plan will include those people. And again, everybody will be presented the same material as the HAB and the ESC. Everyone will be asked the same questions and the same input. All of that will be rolled up and presented to you as a package before your consideration. So any suggestions or comments to make sure that we have as transparent and authentic public involvement process as possible?
I think I mentioned this on the call, Sam, when we had a quick flyover, that, I just want to make sure that, as you start explaining things, not only did Marlon bring up a good point just around acronyms, because we're so used to them around here, but just trying to give folks at least kind of a flyover on how a lot of these things really work. It's one thing to ask somebody if, what do you think about a cat? But it's also another thing to explain it in the backdrop, as Nolan will probably get into it a little later with the other concepts that I've worked around the country, the price tag that came along with them, the, potential construction schedule. the legalities of it, you know, the risk associated, all those different elements that tie into ensuring that people are fully prepared before they make a recommendation on something pertaining to this matter, because this is a very significant concept here, and the last thing you want to do is have folks misinformed, because not only are they going to feel, you know, kind of sleight of hand, or however you want to refer to it as, lack of better terms, kind of manipulated into kind of being guided into a decision, but giving them all the tools and information possible that's afforded to us as we explain and kind of give backdrop to how these things take place, but so that they can make a conscious decision on what it is they think is in the best interest for this project as it pertains to the caps.
I appreciate that, Chair Simpson, and I can tell you, but I know that means nothing unless there's companion action, but we will walk through everyone step by step, the various options with quantitative and qualitative assessments of the facts surrounding it, and give everyone an opportunity to take this a step at a time. It's going to be a building process, and Nolan will present more details in his sample cover explanations that come in a few slides. Nate, did you have a question or comment, Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, just kind of in the same essence as Orlando mentioned around trust, and this is another thing I mentioned, and maybe you guys will brief the group on the comment I made. But I think with you know, with outsiders, and I know this team is a lot bigger than I thought it was. You know, when we had our one-on-one check-in, I think for community members, it'd be great to have an infographic that shows each person on the team in a little bio, if you will, and like their background and why they were even selected to be a part of this, because this team is actually national, and I didn't know it was as national as it is. And you guys mentioned it was like over 15, maybe 20 people. And I think for community, you can get anxiety very quickly, and outsiders coming in to kind of, you know, meet and greet and talk about what happens in your neck of the woods with no real backdrop to what they actually offer in their own communities. So I just think it'd be a great idea to have an infographic, you know, showing a picture of each person and maybe a quick snippet of what they bring to the conversation, so that, as we mentioned, people can have less anxiety and know we've got a great qualified team. So outside of that, I think, you know, we're off to a good start.
Yeah, thank you. And we took that consideration to heart, and we're already having people Photoshop my photo for that graphic, Nate, so we can have a shot of getting forward. Hey, I think that Mr. Kelsey, Doug Kelsey had a question or comment.
Yes, thank you. I think when I see the process, it seems reasonably laid out. I am curious if there's any check-in points for calibration in case we don't have it right. So I'd be curious if there's don't have to answer it right now, but if there's a check-in time to say, okay, let's stop, pause for a sec. What course game corrections do we need to maybe consider here that if things don't play out like the way we think? Because this has got a lot of tension and contentious issues here. So we need to face that head on and allow for disagreements. And then what are we going to do about that when things don't go in a perfect world? So I'm not sure when those are, but I think we should allow for some off-ramp check-in points.
I'll let Nolan respond initially, and then I'll follow up.
Sure. So this is a fairly rapid process. And so the way we've designed this is that we would actually have opportunities for check-in at each work session. And so if we go back to the schedule slide here, each of those colorful dots represents a work session, which is composed of an ESC meeting, a HAB meeting, and a community workshop. Those are our primary times when we check in with you. And so really, those are milestones where we are going to put a package of deliverables together for your review. And in addition to giving us feedback on the deliverables, we're going to seek your feedback about how's the process going. Are we connecting with people that we need to be connecting with? And are we connecting with them in a meaningful way with the opportunity to course correct or change the process if necessary? It is fast enough that if we don't check in at each of those milestones, we'll be done with the process before we have an opportunity to correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the ESC members? So let's go to the next slide, Nolan, and talk about what we call the role of the Highway Covers Coordinating Committee, which is the long version of HC3, as in the 3 Cs. So by way of going back to who is the current membership of that particular organization, right now it is ODOT, Metro, and Portland Public Schools are members of the Highway Cover Coordinating Committee. Previously, it did include Multnomah County, Albina Vision Trust, and the City of Portland bureaus. We have other participants that are involved in these processes from a staff perspective. They include Brendan Finn and Monica Blanchard. Cliff is from ODOT, April, and all the rest of the folks there under the list of consultants. We have Brian Moore that's been attending some for Metro. And then we have the consultant team, our members of the HC3. So that's the backstory. The question is going to be, should we expand that? And before we do, I'll talk about the next slide, which is again is a summary of that particular role. So it really is at this point a staff working group to support the independent cover assessment team. They're to support our development and refinement of the 3 scenarios that we'll be working on, and to review and get some outside input on our deliverables to see what folks have to say. It's a forum for the discussion of our work progress, scheduling, and change management. So given the conversation last month and President Peterson's suggestion during this meeting, the discussion question is the current HC3 membership sufficient to perform this role for us, given all the factors stated, plus the independents, or should additional community representatives be added to that committee? And then depending on the results of that conversation, we will take next steps accordingly. So open that up to conversation. Doug Kelsey?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, when I look at this with the city of Portland not being on the committee now, I'd like to suggest that TriMet have a representative on here who represents queue jumping lanes, transit signal priority. How do you actually run this stuff? So I would suggest maybe that I would put forward that TriMet in some semblance be contributing directly to the committee.
Okay. Other suggestions or comments?
I think maybe given timing, we'll probably know more about how these other groups who actively were participating in the selection of the independent cap are going to play themselves out, or how things will play themselves out after our election cycle. So I don't know if we're having this conversation too early or not. That's my concern.
And President Peterson?
I like the addition of TriMet. I would extend their expertise to actually how to get people on and off and through environments to the bus system, as well as our streetcar system. The entirety of the context here is important, as well as the operation, right? So from both sides, TriMet's a good add. However, fundamentally, I still believe it should be some liaisons from this committee. I will not hesitate to keep reiterating that, because as far as I'm concerned right now, it's a staff-driven independent analysis that you are reporting back to us the outcomes. And until I see actual liaisons, if we are the client, if we are the oversight, then it should contain volunteers from this committee to provide that oversight.
Okay. And what about HAB? What about the Historical Albina Advisory Board as having membership there once it gets stood up? What are your all thoughts about that, as trying to have crossover knowledge and experience, so we're getting that feedback as well. So I have a thumbs up from President Peterson, thumbs up from Bryson, from Doug, Kelsey, from Brendan.
So one thing I think with all these liaison suggestions that I think we talked about in our phone call is that we get the opportunity to have somebody who can bridge that communication gap between what's being done and the various committees, and then thus the community at large. And so we can connect the work and evaluation that's being done with something in a way that we can present it to other people so that they can understand.
Okay. Nolan, you had a question, comment? All right. All right, so given Chair Simpson's suggestion and the constraints of time, I'm going to suggest that we take this back and have some offline conversations with the current members of the Highway Cover Coordinating Committee and Dr. Holt and the facility and Erica Warren on the HAB, and come back with a proposal, and that of course will be after the election. Is that acceptable to folks? Thumbs up if it is. Seen a lot of thumbs up. Thank you so much. So let's now go on to the next slide. And
Lynn wanted to say something, I think.
Again, I have Nolan. Okay, my thing is going badly. President Peterson?
Apologize, but I really want to go back. I'm sorry, who was the prior speaker before me? I'm sorry, I can't see everybody.
Bryson.
Yeah, Bryson.
Davis.
Thank you, Bryson. I just want to reiterate and elevate what he put on the table, because it's really important. And again, I don't think it's up to the coordinating committee to determine its own members.
No.
So I just want to, that really made me feel even more uncomfortable with the process. So if we can just, kind of commit to coming back with a recommendation that includes liaisons from this committee that provides the oversight. And I am not volunteering myself because Metro's already represented on there through staff. I think we need to go back to where Bryson was coming from in terms of having the literal folks who can make the bridges between not just committees, but between that and the community itself. So thank you.
Thank you, President Peterson. We will make sure to circle back on that. Sam?
Yeah, and I apologize. I was only speaking to taking it to the HC3 to tee up the agenda, and because we meet every Monday with the facilitators too, and it was just a scheduling coordination. This is clearly your decision in every way, shape, or form. All right, Nolan.
Thank you. So we have less time than we anticipated, so I will go through these quickly, but I'll also point out that the goal of sharing these with you is not to make sure that you understand all the details and will be quizzed later. But we, after last month's meeting, and then again in some of our one-on-one conversations with you, we heard the question, what exactly do you mean when you say highway covers, and what might they entail? And so we wanted to present a few examples, some of which the members of our team have worked on, so that you understand the range of topics that could be on a highway cover. And it's not to say that these elements are going to be on the scenarios that we propose, but just so you understand the range of ways other cities have dealt with this question around North America. So we will talk about a few different types. We'll understand and illustrate how they fit into their context. I'll try to explain a little bit about how there were either design or partnerships or governance and financing strategies to make them possible. And then we will certainly bring these back as we start generating scenarios if they are relevant to a particular scenario or strategy within a scenario that we're proposing. We'll talk about them in more detail. So this won't be the last time we have to talk about precedent projects or examples. So the first one I want to talk about is Clyde Warren Park. It's probably the most recently built example in downtown Dallas. It's 5.2 acres over the freeway connecting the Arts District and their downtown. There is one small building containing a restaurant and a performance stage, but the rest of it is a park with 5 water features, an open great lawn for gathering and assembly. And it did involve a creative partnership with the Woodall Rogers Park Foundation. It raised private money in order to get this to happen. And then the foundation is also responsible for maintenance and programming of about 1,300 events per year. So it's a very urban context, and you know, as you can see, flat, so that's nice. Move on to the next one. Oh, here's another shot of Clyde Warren Park. This is a project in Boston called Fenway Center, and as you can see, it has buildings over its lid. The project involves a 99-year lease of air rights from MassDOT and built a 90,000 square foot deck over the freeway, which will support a $1 billion 2-tower complex containing office and lab space for life science companies. And this project is expected to break ground this month. And so you can see very, very different from the project in Dallas. Hance Park is a park revitalization project led by the Hance Park Partner Coalition, which is a partnership of the Phoenix Parks and Recreation Department, Phoenix Community Alliance, and Hance Park Conservancy, which will also have both a funding, raising funds for the capital project, as well as maintenance and operation long-term of this park. And there's a number of different ways that it connects to existing and future cultural organizations in Phoenix. And then this project, the Presidio Parkway and Tunnel Tops, is actually a project that our partners at Arup, who are on our team, got to work on in San Francisco. And so I want to yield to Kate White, who will tell you a little bit about this project.
Thanks, Nolan. Hi, everyone. Yeah, a little bit about the Presidio Parkway and Tunnel Tops if you haven't been down here lately in San Francisco. This was a 1.5 mile section rebuild of Highway 101. It has 100,000 vehicles a day. It connects the Presidio and the Golden Gate Bridge. And so it was a cut and 2 tunnels were built, as you can see going in there, and a park being built over the tunnels that's connecting the waterfront and this really national park. And significantly, there was restoration of historically significant buildings and landscape, preserving natural, cultural, scenic, and recreational values of the community here in San Francisco. And this is the Tunnel Top Park that's the last step that's under construction right now.
And this project doesn't have buildings on the cover per se, but they are around the cover. So when we talk about covers and adjacent areas, this was an example of where there were a lot of adjacent areas that were associated with the project. Some of those include buildings, even though they're not over the roadway itself. So we wanted to have a few moments if you have comments or questions, or if there's examples that you're aware of that we didn't include here. Obviously, we'll be looking around the world to see what we might learn about how these kinds of projects can be implemented. But if you have ideas that you want to make sure we consider, please let us know.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments from the Executive Steering Committee?
Just a thank you to the ZGF team. I was one of the people that said, hey, let's get some visuals in there. I think we're calling it dessert to our meals. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. And your ongoing work and just doing a great job. It's fun to observe it and be a part of it. So that just that comment. So
Brendan,
thank
I
you
was careful to let you know this is not dessert. This is the amuse-bouche. So it's the start of the meal. We've got a lot more to come.
I don't even know what a amuse-bouche is, but we'll just have one more slide. We'll gather through. You'll have to educate me. We'll do a real quick, Dr. Holt, to turn it back to you in 1 minute, so you're right on time. So basically, we were in the process of completing our one-on-one ESC interviews. We'll be bringing up the topic of the ESC liaison to HC3. On our next agenda, in addition to that, will be the facilitation needs assessment report, which is how all these pieces, and most importantly, the community outreach to get to the right people engaged so that communication happens, and then a refined plan for that workshop and engagement. So that's it on our end. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate
Sam
the work.
and Dr. Holt, I think President Peterson did want to jump in.
Where are you seeing this? President Peterson.
Sorry, guys. I just wanted to highlight some other projects that we should be looking at. I can do that offline and have you include them next time, or I can do it now.
That would be great if you could do that for us.
Which?
Offline.
Got it.
And we'll circle back to it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Chair Simpson, it looked like you were going to say something.
I'm actually glad the president brought that up because I know there's other CAP projects that are under consideration that are in communities that have kind of similar fabric and framework as this to a certain extent. And I would assume that one of them she's probably alluding to. And so I would look forward to seeing if there's others because obviously she's more versed in this than I. But I did want to say one thing because it's kind of sad to me as I'm looking, to see if there's any chat thing that's left, and I look and I see, unless I'm missing something, Julia is no longer on this call.
She had a different another meeting. She did text me saying she had a 4 o'clock hard stop.
Okay,
So.
Great. Then I'll leave that as what it is. But these things are going to be complicated. So I would just, at the end of the day, I get it's a very sensitive and big, complex, big machine that no one really understands to a certain extent because we haven't done anything like this here. And so I'm just hoping that despite if we have differences that we can work in unison to obviously outside of any of our personal motivations, but work on behalf of the greater good and the broader community. So I'll just leave it with that. Doug.
Appreciate that. Marlon, I see your hand.
Yeah. What's the estimated area?
You're muted.
What's the estimated area that this project's gonna cover? Because saying that we're gonna have a highway cover, how much is this, like an area like 5 miles, 6 miles? Like, I don't know if we got that information.
Brendan or Megan, did you want to speak specifically to that?
Sure, I can answer that. So Marlon, the project in total from the auxiliary lanes that are connecting from 84, which is on the south end of the project, up to I-405 or the Fremont Bridge is on the north end of the project, is just over 1.5 miles. And then the highway covers are currently envisioned to cover really the area that's the Broadway-Weidler interchange. So like where Broadway and Weidler and Williams and Vancouver come across I-5. And so it's that center portion of the full project area that's being envisioned for the highway covers.
Thank you. Nate?
Yeah, my comment would be fast, but I think with those kind of design charrettes, it'd be nice to just talk about prototypes. So like, are we really talking about housing projects? Or are we really talking about mixed use housing with some commercial? Are we talking about all office? Are we talking about some blending of training centers? I think it'd be nice to have a little bit more, I guess, mix, if you will, because again, there's a lot of things our city in particular is wrestling with right now. And it all starts and stops with housing and a job. So for me, I just want to know how well is that blending into whatever we look at as the next iteration.
That is going to be the work of the Historic Albina Advisory Board. That will be predominantly part of their work, not their only work. They will be taking the lead on that. And as you see, Ms. Erica Warren is here, and she will be the key facilitator and strategist for that particular work. So that will be coming up for us to participate in. And the whole purpose and hope and intent is that we collaborate those efforts and that the ESC is very much a part of that process. Doug.
Thank you. I have 2 comments. As it relates to the overbuilds over the highways, I would just ask if the group is looking into these beyond photographs, that we also research what are the funding mechanisms and models that come with these, because these things can get really expensive really quick, well beyond the scope of any natural project. So I think in a step to come, if we can bring back what those alternatives are that may help all of us think in a different way. The second point, which I don't want to lose sight, is I want to come back to beyond this, back to the higher level when we agreed as a group to the value statement, which we did. But I don't want to discount Julia Brim Edwards. I felt, frankly, she was shunned aside a little bit and just kind of cut off a little bit. And so I don't want to let that go in our process. So I think we had agreed on the value statement, but secondarily, we'd agreed there needs to be work on the metric. And I just felt it was a bit edgy how it moved off and just we put her on the sideline. And I don't think that's fair to the fellow members, because we're going to face other topics just like this in the future. And I want to make sure that it is given the attention it needs. So I'll just leave it there.
I appreciate both of those statements. The first one in terms of the HAB, in terms of the covers, that's what the HAB is going to be doing. So we'll make sure that your thoughts and or suggestions and feedback gets to the HAB. And then in terms of any transition, if it was abrupt, there was no intent behind the abruptness other than trying to keep us on point. I do believe I said prior to making that adjustment, this is a conversation we will circle back around on, something to continue on. So parking lot, the parking lot doesn't mean ignore. So I appreciate you raising that. Any other comments? Excellent. So let's talk about next steps. What's in front of us are two particular meetings. We are presently scheduled for the Monday prior to Thanksgiving. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday prior to Thanksgiving. And trust as much as possible, you can put that on your calendar and be prepared. It will be a Monday at this particular time from 3 to 4:30. And then the following a meeting, which would be in December, would be between Christmas and New Year's. My suggestion, and I'd love to get your feedback, is that we move that up a week. Instead of meeting on the 4th Monday, we would meet on the 3rd Monday, which would be the Monday prior to Christmas. So it would be the Monday prior to Christmas at 3 o'clock till 4:30. So if there are any real concerns or objections, you can let us know, unless you have them right now, but you can just communicate in that regard. And lastly, we talked about the potential of needing to meet more frequently or for longer periods of time. My initial suggestion was that we meet for a longer period of time, and then Chair Simpson and I believe Doug Kelsey said, before we determine we'll meet for a longer length of time, maybe we should meet more frequently. So there may be an ask or a conversation about more frequency of meeting that you can anticipate coming as this kind of work is happening and as items can't be thoroughly talked through or considered. We might need to come back sooner to discuss those. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I would appreciate it. So those 3 items, our next schedule, feedback around the Monday before Christmas, and then frequency of meeting. I think that's it. Chair Simpson, did I miss anything that you wanted to cover?
No, I think you did great, Dr. Holt. I will let you know that I will actually be out of town on the 16th to the 25th, so for December. So that's just an FYI for you. I'm not sure how the Wi-Fi connection and all that will work on this to where the family and I are going, but we'll see. That's to be determined.
Thank you for letting us know, sir. Appreciate it. Everyone else, thank you for your time. We appreciate your investment and your energy. Have an excellent evening, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.